Hello, and welcome to Charted, an astrology podcast. My name's James, and today we are going to talk about the 10th house in astrology. So the 10th house is the last of the angles that we're looking at. It's, I think in some ways, probably the most potent. I don't know if I'd say it's the most important. That's certainly kind of a very subjective topic, and that would for sure depend on your own personal chart. But it's a very potent house. The ancient astrologers, at least the ancient Hellenistic astrologers, tended to look at the 10th house as a very potent house, very prominent house for a lot of the ways, techniques they kind of put together. And I would certainly see why they would think that. 10th house is going to deal with some stuff that's very challenging, but very rewarding for us in that area of life that it covers. So let's figure out what it means. We'll start with the astronomy and kind of go from there. So where's the 10th house? That's the first thing we got to figure out. Well, it's pretty much going to be the top of the sky, right? Straight above you, roughly. Now, the 10th house being an angle means we have to look at the point, the specific point, the angle specifically that it's associated with, which in this case is going to be the midheaven. Now, the midheaven floats. I talked about this in the 4th house episode when we talked about the IC. The midheaven floats because it's not straight up. It's not 90 degrees from the horizon. It's actually kind of in a loose phrasing. It's going to be the top of the sun's arc. That's not quite completely 100% accurate, but that's pretty close to what it is essentially. Right? It's going to be the top of the sun's arc, which means that that's going to change throughout the time of day. It's going to change based on where you're at on the planet. It's also going to change based on the season, right? Because as the Earth moves around the sun, right, you get slightly different kind of rotations where the sun is in the sky and so forth. And so the midheaven floats. We are looking at the houses through the whole sign system. At least that's what I use. That's how I look at things. It's how a lot of the astrological logic kind of makes sense, which means the midheaven may or may not be in your 10th house. That's not a bad thing. It just means it's going to have certain nuances to the way you would interpret it. But if you are looking at it and you're thinking, oh, my midheaven's way over there and the side, and usually it would be, if it's not in the 10th, it's in either the 11th or the 9th. But if you live very far north, very far south, you may see it in the 12th or in the 8th. In a quadrant-based system, so if you're not using whole sign, what you will see is that the midheaven will start the 10th. So the 10th will start with the midheaven. It's called the 10th house cusp. So there's one distinction I want to make before we kind of dive into this. Right? But looking at it through whole sign, the 10th house is always going to occupy that kind of top area of sky. Which means we want to understand, what's the sun doing in that area of sky? Well, right, it's right at the top. It's at the peak, the pinnacle, which means it's A, very visible. Number 2, or B, is that's where it's kind of equally dividing between east and west, which means it's going to be the brightest part of the day. It's where the sun is shining its light most, right, highest coverage, so to speak. Because it's not on one side of the sky or the other. It's kind of right up hitting everything. So it's on full display, and it's got full coverage of kind of its light that's radiating it outward. What else can we say about the 10th house? Well, number 1, it's going to be square to the ascendant, or square to the first house, which means it's an area of life that's naturally tense for us as individuals. There's a natural tension there, forces us to adjust, or who we are kind of forces that area of our life to adjust, right? So there's a constant adjustment that's going on from that tension. We talked about that tension, right, with the 4th house, with it representing the family. And that the tension that your family kind of provides you, right? They raise you, obviously, force you to grow, and so forth. The 10th house is going to have a similar dynamic, and that will make sense here very quickly. Next thing, the 10th house is going to be opposite to the 4th. Seems very obvious. But as we've talked about with the oppositional houses, there's now this element of mutual exclusivity, right? So what does the 4th house represent? If you remember from that episode, 4th house represents our private life. So therefore, the 10th is going to represent our public life. We'll come back to that in just a moment. Last thing, there are no planets in their joy in the 10th house, right? You would kind of think the sun because it's the top, right, the highest point. But really, as we saw in the last episode, the 9th house is where the sun finds its joy, because it's moving on to new horizons. It's broadening its horizons. It's kind of fulfilling its purpose. It's the hottest part of the day. So even though the light is kind of beginning to diminish, it's got other things going on for it, which is why it likes the 9th house. Now, the 10th house, much like the 4th, being an angle, is dividing between east and west, right? Which means it's kind of taking on those qualities equally. And as we've seen, the east side of the chart represents stuff that's more kind of me-centric, self-centric. Doesn't mean it exclusively deals with ourselves, but it's things that kind of stem and orient around ourselves. The western side tends to be things that orient around other people and how we interact with those orientations, right? So it being an angle split between them, much like the 4th house, means it's going to kind of have equal pull from both. And then obviously being at the top of the sky or above the horizon generally means it's dealing with things that are more public, which the reason being is because it's the house of publicity, right? So let's dive into this. 10th house. Why does it represent publicity? Well, we could say, number one, it's opposite to the 4th house. As I mentioned, right, you have to be mutually exclusive. So that would infer that if the 4th house represents privacy, the 10th represents publicity. But even more so, if we look at what the sun is doing in the 10th house, what do we see? It is the most visible point in the sky because everybody can see it. Right? Obviously, it's the sun. Everybody can see the sun when it's above the horizon anyway. But let's use a different example. If you want to be seen in a crowd, how do you do that? Right? What do? You get up higher than the rest of the crowd. You stand up on a pedestal or a stage or something where then everyone can see you. If you're just on the ground with the rest of the crowd, right, or only kind of slightly elevated, most people won't see you. So you have to get up high. And that's the nature of what's going on in the 10th house. The sun is up high. Now everybody can see it, or any other planet that is there. They're now in a position where everyone can see them. So the nature of the 10th house is to be seen, as well as what else happens when you have that high vantage point. You can see everything else. Right? It kind of cuts both ways. You now have great visibility as well. So in the 10th house, then, there is no lack, or I should say there is no hiding anything. Everything is visible. So visibility is at its maximum in the 10th. So what does that imply then, right, in terms of practically speaking what it's going to represent? A lot of astrologers will kind of default to calling the 10th house the house of career and just leave it at that. Certainly, it's going to represent that, but why? Well, your career is what you're known for, right? So the 10th house being your public life, right? Everything you're doing in the most public way means it's going to deal with how you are perceived in public. That is your reputation, right? So it's going to be your public image, your public reputation. And what does that imply? It implies what you are known for. And most people, right, when you meet somebody, what do you tell them for the first time, right? Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I do X, Y, Z, right? I'm an engineer. I'm a doctor. I'm a nurse. I walk dogs. I'm a student. Whatever it is, right, that you're known for, right? That's usually how you introduce yourself. And that's how people in kind of the public sphere begin to know you. And if you're somebody who's doing something publicly, right, say you're a content creator, how do people know what a particular content creator does? Well, they have content. So they see this person. The only thing they know them as that person in the YouTube videos they're watching, or the TikTok videos they're watching, or so forth. Or if they're an actor, right? Actors and people like that, very public-facing, famous people. It's pretty easy to kind of see that 10th house orientedness, right? It's very right up there. But let's use a more kind of personal, private example. If you've got a lot or a very prominent 10th house, does it mean you're going to be famous? Not necessarily. But there is going to be a certain level of prominence in terms of the publicity you have within your own life, within the context of your own life. So, for example, you may be well respected within your own field, right? Or maybe infamous within your own field. Maybe another way that goes. Because 10th house is not just the fame you get, but it's also the infamy that you get, right? The detraction that you get. Because it's everything to do with your public reputation and how that's perceived. So as I said, it's going to represent your career in the sense that your career directly influences how people see you, what they know you as. But that doesn't mean it's the only thing people know you as, because people could know you as something else. Maybe you do content creation on the side, right? Maybe you did something very charitable, or you do some kind of service-oriented work, kind of as a passion or religious belief or whatever it is, something you do on the side isn't really career-oriented, but because you believe in it, that's what people know you for. Maybe they know you for your beliefs, right? Maybe you're very outspoken about what you believe, so that shows up then as something that you're known for. So the 10th house deals with all those different layers of how people can perceive you. So let's take an example, right? Because how does this function in a kind of practical sense? I want to look at two signs because they're pretty easy to understand this. Number one, we'll look at Aries rising. Aries rising has Capricorn in the 10th house, right? Seems kind of odd. Aries is very direct, fiery. Capricorn's not so fiery, but they're hardworking. And if you think about what Aries is trying to do, what does it value? It's got second house in Taurus. It values resources, stability. So how do you get resources? You work for them. So what do people see with Aries? They see somebody who's wanting to climb the mountain, right? That's a Capricorn way. Slowly chip away at something till you get there. Slowly build, slowly climb. So for Aries, they tend to be seen publicly as somebody who's trying to climb up that mountain, right? Who's trying to get to the top. If you think Aries too, Aries is also very competitive. So it may not necessarily be physical resources they're building up, but they're building up something to get to the top. They're always challenging themselves. Another example, if we think of an Aquarius rising has Scorpio in the 10th house, right? What does that mean? Well, Scorpio is very intimate, which is kind of funny because Aquarius is very detached and eclectic. But if you understand Aquarius, you know they're very resonant with society. They're very resonant with the average person. That's the nature of Aquarius. They understand society's kind of boundaries and limits and how the common person kind of all functions together as a whole and how it's all organized. But as a result, they want to what? They want to stand out. Aquarius naturally is associated with kind of being quirky or unique or what have you. Right? Probably the most, I don't want to say, maybe not abstract, that might be a wrong word, but Aquarius typically it's certainly got the most unique style to it. People associate the uniqueness with Uranus, but it's really because it understands society, but it really has this 10th house dynamic where it's Scorpio. And Scorpio has one thing it really kind of always does. It does its own thing. It's very singularly focused. And it says, I'm not going to care about what other people do or think. I'm going to do my own thing. I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. And so when you have that dynamic in the 10th, that means the way that Aquarius approaches its public image is it's always doing its own thing. It doesn't care necessarily, right, what other people think to an extent. Also has a very intimate relationship then with its public image. So it's well curated in a lot of cases, which leads to a lot of Aquarius kind of being eccentric or willing to kind of be themselves, very, very comfortable being themselves in public settings. So that's kind of what we see then with the 10th house. 10th house is showing how we handle our public image, how we handle our kind of persona out in the public world. Also shows how we apply ourselves to reaching the top. That's the next thing. 10th house is the top of the sky. So it's showing what we're trying to climb to. I mentioned this with Aries rising. Aries rising is trying to climb to the top of the mountain. It wants to show everyone that it is the best, that what it's capable of, which means the slow, arduous grind up to the top of challenge and turmoil, because that is needed in order to find challenges, to grow. It's kind of the Aries way up. If you look at a Capricorn rising, what has it got in the 10th house? It's got Libra. And one of the things with Capricorn is it's low. It's low to the ground. It's unimportant. Right? It's common with the Saturn signs. But in the case of a Capricorn, it's got Libra, so it's working for what? It's working up to become an equal, to be seen as an equal, because it naturally kind of sees itself as below other people a lot of the times. Capricorn also looking to find harmony and balance, right, from a home life that was very much not that. So the 10th house is showing kind of what we are striving for in a lot of ways, or at least how we're kind of going about what we're striving for. The 11th house really shows what each sign is kind of chasing after in a lot of ways, but the 10th is showing how we're doing it. And it's showing how we handle our public reputation, our public image, and it's going to show what we are known for in all the things that we do, which also means it's going to show all the things that affect us or affect our reputation in a negative way. What does that mean? It means it's going to show events like a marriage, right? Why? Well, marriage is what? It's two people, unless you elope, right? Or something very private, secret. But usually you have a wedding, you invite other people to kind of declare your love for each other, right? The bond. You get married before witnesses and so forth. So it's a very public-oriented thing. And so things like that are going to be represented by the 10th house, right? Things we do in public. Not just our career, not just our public image, but the things we do in a very public sense. Weddings, charities, public events. It's also going to show the negative things that happen to us on a public level. Such as what? Well, demotions, right? Divorce. Things of that nature that are very publicly damaging to our reputation. It's also going to show, I don't want to say events, I kind of said that, but it's, how do I phrase this? It deals with things that we do that are kind of public natured. I guess I kind of already said that, but that have public consequences. I guess that's a better term. Right? That things that we're trying to expose in the world. Because as I said, this 10th house there's no hiding anything. There are no secrets in the 10th house. So it deals with everything that is naturally open and exposed. If you have planets in the 10th house, that means you tend to play out those planets, or that aspect of your personality is naturally going to come forth through a more public-facing way. People are going to notice it. It's going to be prominent. That's why the ancients tend to see it as very prominent, because planets there are very noticeable. They're obvious. So if you say the sun in the 10th house, right? It's going to be somebody who's going to be very, very solar. Going to really embody that kind of conscious energy. But Mars in the 10th house, obviously, you get somebody who's pretty masculine, aggressive, a lot of times. Alternatively, it could also be the things we deal with, right? Maybe not necessarily personality we see playing out, but the things in life we deal with on a very public level. If it's Venus, maybe relationships become a very public public relationships become a very prominent aspect of something somebody has going on in their life. So the 10th house deals with this publicity. It's a pretty straightforward house, like I said. It deals with our career, but only insofar as it represents what we're doing, kind of what we're known for. As I said, 6th house also represents work. So what we're doing for a career to support ourselves may show up more in the 6th than the 10th, especially if we're known for other things. And then finally, it's going to represent any kind of events or goings on that we have that tend to be more publicly oriented. Gatherings, weddings, etc. So looking at how the 10th house interacts with the other houses, right? Obviously, as I said, it's opposite to the 4th. That makes total sense. 4th house represents things that are very private, our home, our family. The 10th house is public. It's obviously an opposition. Makes sense. They don't exist together, or it's very hard for them to kind of function simultaneously. The trine houses are going to be the 2nd and the 6th. Why? Well, the 2nd is your values and your resources and your support system. In order to climb higher in the world, what do you need? You need support and you need resources. And so that's a natural flow from one to the other. And as you climb higher, you naturally tend to acquire more resources. And it tends to shape your values as you're more publicly oriented. Whether it's values that you have to kind of detract from in order to kind of maintain that publicity, or ones that, right, you stick to your values. They may be things that publicly detract from you. You may find you're now seen as an adversary by certain people, by certain groups. Maybe it's because of your political beliefs, political values, right, religious values, what have you. And so that's the natural flow that happens there. Also, obviously, with the 10th house, dealing with our career to an extent, what you're doing in your career is naturally going to outflow to the resources you kind of acquire. And consequentially, the people that you meet in public oftentimes can become people that support you. Right? Think of a politician. What are they doing? They're going out publicly to try and attract people to them so that they can get support. The trine to the 6th house deals with work, deals with conflict, deals with obstacles. And obviously, if you want to get to the top, those are naturally things you have to climb through. You don't get to the top by kicking back and relaxing, right? That's a very easy flow there as well. And as you become more and more public, as you become more and more exposed, it's going to lead to more things coming up that you have to work through. Because when things are exposed, you see all the flaws, you see all the negative qualities, you see all the hiccups. And so that's the nature of it. Also, again, that kind of work, career, right, kind of pipeline there too. The square houses, right, as I mentioned, square to the 1st house. It's also going to be square to the 7th, right? With the 1st house, anything that happens to you personally is naturally going to affect how you kind of operate. If you change on a very personal level, it's going to affect how you operate publicly, how you're seen publicly, right? On the other hand, the things you deal with in the public life, right? Let's say you get married, right? That's a public event, but that certainly is going to change you. Or you get in a very major, very public, say, court case or something, right? Humiliates you, big blow to your reputation. That's going to change who you are on some level. It's going to make you sit with things. So that's the nature of the square. It's a challenging aspect. It's going to force a lot of growth, a lot of conflict and tension over time. The other square being to the 7th house means it's going to be square to your partnerships and to your enemies. So this means, one, naturally, the 7th house is going to, the 10th house is going to naturally provide enemies, right? They're going to detract from your ability to climb high. Number 2, it's going to put tension on your partnerships because it's hard to pursue a strong career, for example, while also maintaining a really tight marriage. You can do it, but it requires effort. You can't put your full devotion to something, right, some big achievement, while also simultaneously putting your full effort towards another person. It's very hard to do that. It requires a lot of adjustment, a lot of tension. So that's the nature of that aspect. What about the sextile? The 10th house is going to be sextile to the 8th, right? Why? Well, the 8th house deals with, right, danger, secrets, intimacy, shared resources. Well, the 10th house deals with what's public. And as you operate in public, what do? You naturally interact with other people. This can lead to opportunities to get shared resources from them. That's one thing. But number two, it exposes things. And so it is the opportunity there becomes the exposure of secrets, the exposure of taboo things, or alternatively, if you are doing things that are taboo, right, that's going to influence how you are perceived. For example, this is an astrology podcast, right? What happens when you tell people you're an astrologer? They probably, vast majority of the people in the West, maybe not that many, but a lot of people probably look at you funny, say, oh, you're one of those people, right? Hopefully that attitude is changing slowly, but that's the nature of, right, the 8th house, kind of why it's an opportunistic, that sextile aspect, right? There's kind of an easy flow, but it can lead to some things as well that kind of just naturally bubble up from it. The other sextile is going to be the 12th house. This one's a little weirder. Why the 12th? Because the 12th house deals with isolation. It deals with subconscious. It deals with things that are hidden, truly hidden. But I mentioned isolation. And again, there's that kind of exposing quality going on for sure. Right? The 10th house is going to reveal things of the 12th, or at least has the opportunity to do that. But number two, right, there's a term. It's lonely at the top. Right? When you get to the top of your career and you become the boss, right? You don't answer to anybody anymore. Now it's just you. And that's isolating. Right? The other thing, you talk to celebrities. There's a very easy example. And what happens, they can't live their normal lives. They have to kind of isolate to an extent. Why? Because they get swarmed by paparazzi, admirers, fans, etc. They go somewhere, they're always getting asked for autographs, pictures, what have you, right? And so what do they have to do? They have to isolate. They have to live life in a more, right, self-contained kind of a way. And that's the nature of publicity. As you climb to the top of things, it becomes more and more isolating. You become surrounded by less and less of the kind of the common person. You can't blend in anymore. There's no hiding. It's a very isolating thing. What about the aversion houses, right? The 9th house, this one actually probably the least bad, I guess, if you want to put it that way, of the aversion houses. But the 9th house is an aversion to the 10th. But the 9th house deals with your beliefs, deals with your worldview, your education, right? How you grow yourself. And that naturally flows into the 10th, right? Your belief systems are naturally going to influence the 10th house and what you're doing in your career, what you're doing in life, what you're known for, the things you're known for. But it's kind of it's influencing it in a way that's not really something you can control. Because what you believe and how people are going to react to it isn't something you can deal with. Unless you want to change your beliefs, but that's, it's a bit uncomfortable. And so that's the nature of the dynamic of the 9th and the 10th. Is, they flow through to each other, but it can have unintended consequences that are frustrating. And it's not consequences you can largely channel, that you can largely deal with in an easy way or a controlled way. The other semi-sextile, 30-degree aspect, the aversion aspect, is going to be the 11th house. And this is kind of a similar dynamic where the 11th house represents our social groups, our friends, our followers. And what you do in your public life, your career, what you're known for, is naturally going to acquire or not acquire friends and followers and social groups, or detract from those things. That's not really something you can control. At least not fully. And certainly you can choose to kind of pursue certain groups versus others. But again, it's something that kind of flows from one to the next without much of an ability to do anything about it. It's just kind of a natural outpouring of it. And it's, again, if you look at something called derivative houses, the 10th house, the 11th house is the second from the 10th. So it means the resources you get from the 10th house tend to be what? Social groups, also achievements, rewards. The other the inconjunct aversions are going to be the 5th house and 3rd. Why are those in conjunction? Why are they in aversion? Why are they so discomforting for the 10th house? Well, the 5th house deals with our passions. It deals with fun and excitement and romance. And if you're trying to do things publicly, whether it's career or whatever else, that's not really something you mix with fun and games or mix with your romantic life. It's really uncomfortable to have a high-profile romantic life for all the world to see. It's very hard for you to have children, raise your children in a very public way, where it's not easy for them maybe. And so that's the nature of the inconjunction. It's kind of uncomfortable, right? On the other side, you got the 3rd house. 3rd house deals with your local space, right? It deals with your skills, the things you do in your daily practices and your communication. And certainly that's things that can kind of influence the 10th, but it's not really usually the focus, right? What you're doing in your day-to-day doesn't really have much bearing, at least not in a direct way, to who you're perceived as, right? Because again, you're kind of just living your normal life. You're going out, you're eating your food and so forth. And that's not something that's necessarily typical of generating a lot of public kind of persona. And so that's the inconjunction there, where they just don't have much in common, right? But one can ultimately influence the other to an extent. So that's the 10th house. As I said, right, it's pretty straightforward. Represents publicity, everything that stems from it, meaning our career, our reputation, public events, right? What we do out in the world in an open and exposed way. And therefore it represents things that get exposed as well, or that we're able to expose and so forth. So next week we'll look at the 11th house and kind of go from there. We got 2 more houses to go. So hopefully you enjoyed this podcast. If you are interested in a reading, want to look at your own 10th house, you can reach out to me. My email is james@jdastrology.com. Alternatively, you can just go to my website, jdastrology.com. Again, hope you enjoyed the podcast and have a lovely, lovely week. Thanks for listening.